Happy Thursday. You know, happy Taco Thursday, but it's the Cowboys versus Jets preview, and I got my guy Shane. How's it going, Shane?
Well, we just celebrated the largest victory in an opening season game ever, and it happened to come not only at the hands of a division rival, but against a team that was talking a little bit too much. I mean, we figured they'd be better. They didn't look better, but we figured they would. But the problem is, people didn't figure the Cowboys would be that much better. The defense looked insane.
Who are you, man? 40 zip. Like I thought they would at least put some points on the board at this game because we were having that talk with Omar and stuff, and we were saying it was going to be a close game, and now we're looking at 40 zip. I was like, I wouldn't have expected that. But before we get into the show, we got to show love to our sponsors, and that is What a Clean Solution. You need to get your carpets clean, couches, tile, and grout. Moving in or moving out, you need to get that place looking brand new. Call What a Clean Solutions, a family-owned mobile cleaning service that can clean anything from a small carpet to even making your car or truck look brand new. Give them a call at 210-790-1410 and use the promo code TNT for 5% off your total cleaning. That promo code is TNT at 210-790-1410 for 5% off. And if you want to make sure that the promo code is right, just look on the bottom of the screen. We got you. But yeah, we got to talk about this before we get into the preview. We got to talk about the Cowboys versus Jets because I'm not Cowboys versus Giants. I'm getting my New York teams mixed up.
Yeah, well, forget about New York. Let's focus on New York. Now, let's be honest. When we talked about the previews, I just want to jump right in. When we talked about the preview, I think the player that we most brought the most offensively was Saquon Barkley. That was the guy who, when we talked about going into this game, that was going to be the guy who was going to be the focal point of the offense. And that first drive, they averaged actually over 5 yards per play on the ground. And after that first drive, I was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good. And they stopped him on that drive. They looked a little shaky, but they caused a field goal attempt. And then Wanya Thomas, our preseason MVP, probably at least defensively, had that block. And then the new guy, Noah Igbenogany, I hope I pronounced that right. I really do. He comes up with the scoop and score. His biggest attribute was always speed. He always brought a lot of speed to the cornerback room. In one play, I forgot who tweeted this out, but this is true. In one play, Noah Igbenogany did more for the Cowboys as a special teams gunner than Kelvin Joseph did. So right away, that puts the Cowboys trade at least more in their favor. Now defensively, like it's hard to really pinpoint who was really the best. Micah Parsons is obviously going to lead the charge. We can't ignore the interior pass rush from Chauncey Golston, Osa Digizua. Sam Williams brought a lot of pressure. Dorrance Armstrong had a really, really nice game. Dante Fowler had a couple nice plays. I think he got one pressure, but he had two pass breakups. He actually led anyone in the front seven linebackers or edge rushers with pass breakups. That front seven, not only like the starters, but the depth looks fantastic, right?
Yeah. It's like they got fresh legs out there. It's like every time you see in a rotation, you would see Osa playing the seven. You just see all these different multiple fronts. It's just like, man.
They did.
You don't realize how much good depth we have on this defense. Like, like when it came to Wanya, he was a guy that was on the practice squad last year. Now you're looking at a guy that brings versatility with his size, making impact on special teams and on defense. It's crazy how this defense is looking. I can't wait to see what they do this week, though.
Quietly, the starting linebackers had a really nice game. Damone Clark was around the ball everywhere. I know how much you love Damone. I love Damone Clark. I know how much you've been raving about Damone Clark. Yeah. Leighton Vander Esch, we saw him play a little bit of edge. But there was a couple of plays where Micah was playing the mic and Leighton was playing the edge. And I thought that was just going to be something they tried out in the preseason, but they actually used it in the game a few times. Leighton looked more like himself. Again, it's week one, so everyone's going to look more fresh. And my guy, one of my favorite guys from last year's draft class, Marquise Bell, led the team in tackles. I think he had a pass breakup and a tackle for loss. And I already knew why they went low on linebackers. We talked about it whenever we did our show talking about the roster. They have so many safeties and defensive ends who can play as sort of a linebacker sub, just because they're not going to go the traditional 4-man front 3 linebacker look.
Yeah.
They have players who play multiple spots. I don't think we can name one player on this defense except maybe Malik Hooker, and Trevon Diggs, who don't play more than one role. There's too many guys on this team that have versatility. I didn't want to like go into like the next part of the Giants talk without like at least acknowledging the linebackers. Jaron Curse, obviously, he did his thing covering the tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
This front seven looks fantastic. The linebackers definitely did their job. The linebackers were responsible for the majority of the tackles, and they more than stepped up.
Yeah, they did. And then it benefits having like a Jonathan Hankins and a Mozzie Smith who are controlling the gaps where they can run free.
Mozzie looked good too.
You got to show love to the big fellas. Hey,
they did their job. They held their own in the gaps. You're right. We knew Hankins was going to do that.
Yeah.
Mozzie, I don't know. I think you were a little more confident than I was about him going into the first game.
Yeah.
Just because I saw in the preseason, okay, how is he? He's looking kind of iffy, not bad, not great, but he's doing what he needs to do, but kind of iffy against guys who are second and third teamers. He went against the Giants' offensive line and held his own pretty much for most of the game.
He did. I was looking at highlights. I know from not highlights, look little tape. Did you see that he was a D-Law? They were putting him against a tight end. And
yes,
he basically just pushed him out of the way and got that pressure. I was like,
yes, he did. Well, they ran him as like a wide 5, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And they had I think they ran a safety blitz inside of that one, or maybe Marquise Bell was playing as a linebacker of that, but he blitzed the inside. I know you're talking about where he was outside. Marquise blitzed inside of him, so that put Law one on one with the tight end. I know you're talking about. But honestly, as great as the front seven and the pass rush were, I felt like the secondary was like the biggest reason for why the game was the way it was. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, the secondary looked like a different day and different times, especially when you looked at that play when Diggs did that phone. And the thing about Diggs, you seen where he was making tackles now. He wasn't kind of like grabbing.
Very physical.
Yeah, he was playing physical. He's not that finesse corner like a lot of people have been saying. Yeah, he stepped it on that part, and he made that forced fumble where DaRon Bland made that touchdown.
Stephon Gilmore only allowed one catch.
Yeah.
Stephon Gilmore looked like, the Stephon Gilmore everyone's been talking about. I know how high you were on him. I had my reservations just in terms of age because he is 33. I think he's 32, 33, something like that.
Yeah, one of those.
But the thing about that is like future Hall of Fame players, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Future Hall of Fame players, like they just find a way to adapt. The best ones do. And the secondary with him, DaRon Bland on the inside. I give credit to that interception primarily to Diggs because he went up there and knocked the ball out of Saquon's hands, popped it up, and DaRon Bland was in the right place at the right time. You were going to catch him anyways because it doesn't matter how close he is. DaRon Bland's actually one of the faster guys in the secondary. People forget that. I think he ran like a 4.3 something in the combine.
It was one
and
of
then,
those.
Yeah, and then the safeties, obviously, Wanya Thomas set the tone. Jaron Curse had a quiet, really good night because he was out there like covering tight ends like he does. Malik Hooker almost had an interception, hit him right at the chest, but it counts as a pass breakup. But I think he would have rather had the pick. Donovan Wilson, I still think is missed, but like the fact that they were able to use Marquise Bell at linebacker, Wanya Thomas in that role. Izzy McQuamu had a turnover also. I think he had a tackle and a fumble recovery. Everyone in the secondary had some kind of play. And so once they bring back Donovan Wilson and Jordan Lewis, who are back at practice now, that's just going to add more depth to an already deep secondary.
Yeah, it's just like you got new wrinkles in there, and then you bring back the ones that were tone setters to this defense. So it's like, hey, we got another player coming in, and we can switch it out. And it's just like there'll be some players like, oh, they're going to be inactive because of the fact of how much depth we have on this defense.
Now, offensively, if we want to
yeah, we got to show love to them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know because I want to be able to like get to the preview, but I also make sure we cover everything. Offensively, I think everyone's in Cowboys Nation's kind of in agreement. The offense look is kind of incomplete. One, the offense wasn't really needed. Two, it was raining, so they weren't going to throw the ball as much anyway. And two, like they were just so good at running the ball, and they had such a huge lead that throwing the ball would have been a stupid move anyway. So weather and the lead were reasons why Dak didn't need to throw the ball that much. My concern was they did have 4 drops. I will give it credence to the fact that weather was bad. But, I mean, ultimately the offense looked fine. It was good for what it was. But they didn't The offense moved the ball along. They scored on the starting offensive line. I think scored on all but 1 or 2 drives. They looked effective. They did what they needed to do. We saw all the running backs. We saw all the running backs get a carry. Hunter Lupke, I want to throw that out there. Hunter Lupke, we saw him finally play some fullback. He looked effective. We saw him only as a tailback in the preseason, but he looked effective as a blocker, especially as a lead blocker. And that's kind of exciting to see because we know how good of a player he is with the ball in his hands, and to see him develop as a blocker, as that fullback. Could we be seeing that John Kuhn, Kyle Juszczyk kind of player with the starters hat?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we didn't get to see in the preseason. Now we get to see he looked like he could be that complete fullback, because it's like a breath of fresh air to see a fullback in a Dallas Cowboy uniform again.
I kind of missed it, right?
Yeah, it feels like it's meant to be a fullback on the Cowboys. It's just we run the effective run game, but we just missing that fullback just to get those extra yardage.
Yeah, we would use linemen and tight ends and H backs, but like you're right, like something about having a fullback back that just like kind of feels right. Probably because like when I was a kid and growing up, Emmett was my first running back, and I don't want to put my age out there, but I mean, you know how old I am. Everyone like Emmett was my first running back, so Moose was my first fullback, and that's like kind of what I associate the Cowboys' best running days. I know you're my age, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
like it just looks better, doesn't it?
Yeah,
and statistically, CeeDee Lamb was solid. He had 4 catches, 77 yards, did that big, I think 48, 49-yard reception down the sideline. He's not a burner. We know that he ain't going to burn people down the field. He's one of those guys, if you have enough space, he can take it all the way. But a faster cornerback can track him down. Whatever. It's fine. He's a 4.4 guy. Not all 4.4 guys can have that second-level speed. I was impressed with Brandon Cooks. He had that really impressive catch across the middle on 4th down. I love that they went from 4th and 3, by the way. And he also did a good job of drawing the penalties. That's one of those underrated things that people don't take for granted. Like that's extra yardage. That's extra yardage that you don't have to even really do much except to sell it. And Michael Gallup, even though that catch was out of bounds, did you think that catch when he was kind of floating out of bounds and got shoved out? Like if he's not shoved out, that's a catch. But he just looked really good catching it. Dak put the ball where it needed to be. I think for what we saw just of the passing game looked fine. Aside from the drops.
All right, you take out the drops, it was a damn good game with the passing game. The only biggest knock is just wanted to see the improvement with the tight ends, because we know we had a couple drops with Ferguson, and Hendershot could have got that touchdown. That was
oh my
right.
God, Hendershot. That I know, yeah. That should he owes Dak one of those passes.
Oh yeah.
And before we move on, the offensive line, Biotish looks better. Terrence Steele looks like himself. We know about Zach Martin. Tyron Smith is unfortunately for me. Tyron Smith is going to be a week-by-week player, but Chuma Edoga looked, I would say, serviceable as the left guard. I would have liked to have seen someone like Asim Richards, just because I think the upside of him is there, but I think they wanted to go with more of a veteran presence, something like, well, you know what you got in Chuma. And Chuma, everyone talked about how bad he looked in camp. In camp, he was primarily playing tackle. Maybe he really is one of those guys that he can play flex, but he's only going to be a flex guard, a left and right guard. He can't be a left side or right side player. And that's okay. Because that left guard filling in for Tyler Smith, I was actually okay. Like, this seems to work. And there was no slouch. The Giants have one of the better front sevens in the league. They do. They just couldn't do anything that night. I thought the offensive line did well for what they needed to against a more than serviceable unit.
Yeah, when you look at our offensive line, like you were saying that Edoga wasn't doing well at tackle, but he could be that solidified left guard when Tyler Smith is out. Like when it comes to TJ Bass, he's more of the right guard type of guy.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we kind of had that. I know I'm going back a couple years with McGovern.
I
see McGovern was a better serviceable right guard, but
yes,
he got one of the best right guards in the league, so he wouldn't have a chance.
He had to learn left guard, and he was fine his last year. But yes, yeah. I agree with all that.
Yeah, it's good to see that we have depth, because we were all questioning, dude, our offensive line had depth. If like one of our best players is out, we still, when it comes to the left side, I think we're good. We're still trying to figure out who's going to be that right tackle, just in case it was still anything, but. It was overall, I'd give it a B when it comes to the offensive line. And
again, like I said, it's incomplete. We don't know.
Yeah. It's week 1, and I know we're all going to have our overreactions, but it just
run blocking did it great.
Yeah, it did a great job running the ball well. Do you remember on 13 personnel with Cavante Turpin made that touchdown?
Oh, that was actually a lot of fun. I love that they're finding ways to get Cavante Turpin the ball. They use him as a little bit as a running back. They've seen him a little bit on the line, but I love the fact that they're like, okay, we got this. We got all this speed. It can't go to waste.
Yeah.
And so I'm ready for like the mini package where they have Deuce and Cavante out there on the field at the same time, and we'll see what they can do with that. Because if you got all these toys, you got to play with them.
Oh, you got to. And I'm liking how they're utilizing them in this offense. It's not like, oh, okay, we're gonna put you at this position. It's basically positionless football right now when it comes to Dallas Cowboys, and I like it.
Love it.
Yeah. So we got to get into Jets talk.
Yes.
These New York teams are kind of mixing me up a little bit, but
it's okay.
Yeah. So, but what is like a key matchup you're looking for in this game?
You know, the biggest weakness everyone talks about from the Jets, if we take quarterback out of the equation, has been the offensive line, which is kind of weird because they have guys there that have been serviceable in the past. Dwayne Brown, Laken Tomlinson, Connor McGovern, not the one that played here, but the one that's been the Jets at center. Elijah Barry Tucker, who I thought was a better left side player than right, but they're putting him at right guard. And then Mekhi Becton, who's like, injury prone for most of his career. That on the surface, that's actually a good starting five, but they allowed a lot against a Bills pass rush, which is like, no offense to the Bills pass rush, it ain't ours. The Cowboys pass rush is way deeper and way more top heavy. That's going to be the area in terms of like in terms of strength. The matchup I'm interested to see will be actually DJ Reed, the cornerback, who's going to be, I think, is going to primarily cover CeeDee Lamb because Sauce Gardner is an outside guy. DJ Reed is a guy who can play both outside and in the nickel. And then since CeeDee Lamb is a flex guy, you play in the middle, in the slot, and sometimes outside, depending on formations. I feel like DJ Reed's gonna be the guy who primarily covers CeeDee Lamb. And DJ Reed was a guy from Kansas State I really liked. He was a small, like 5'9", 190, physical corner who got his hands on the ball. He was always around there. And I wanted him to be on the Cowboys, and he's become one of the better, especially not talked about cornerbacks in the league. I think that's going to be the matchup offensively we'll see because now that we're back at AT&T Stadium, weather won't be an issue. It'll be on turf. It'll be in the dome. So the elements will be out of the game. So the passing game is going to have to be there. I think, though, just if we saw, especially from the first half, and I tweeted this out for those that follow me on Twitter, 12 personnel, so one running back, two tight ends, that might be the way to go a little bit. Because when the Bills ran the ball out of 12 personnel, they moved it really well, especially in that first half before turnovers started to kick in, and they were forced to pass because they were falling behind, or not falling behind, but they were letting the Jets come back in. And once the Jets took the Bills out of their rhythm, that took away the running game effectiveness. In fact, James Cook, the running back, he looked really good in the first half, and they cut his carries, I believe, less than half from the first half to finish the game. And so I think the Cowboys, if they want to win this game, they got to be able to move the ball on the ground, and they have to be able to get through the Jets' offensive line. I think an area of weakness the Cowboys need to watch out for themselves, just for themselves, right? If we take the passing game out of this, I'm actually interested to see who Sauce Gardner covers because with the reports that Brandon Cooks is like could play, I think I'd rather sit him, but that would also tell me that Michael Gallup is likely the guy that Sauce Gardner covers. Is that going to try and test Sauce? Because I know a lot of those on those third and long plays, a lot of his passes that he likes to go to, Michael Gallup's kind of his guy for those longer plays. So for me, in terms of both sides, those are the areas of weakness that I would be concerned about. The Jets have, if not the best secondary, the second best secondary behind only the Cowboys. And that's going to be, I think, the key area the Cowboys can – may have to win essentially because I am not taking the Jets lightly no matter who's at quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. So speaking on the receivers, when it comes, you think this could be the game if we sit out Brandon Cooks? You think you can get a Tolbert involved in the game?
I think you have to. I think Jalen Tolbert has not only earned minutes, he played some last week. There's no reason to throw the ball.
Yeah.
Right now, it seems like Cavante Turpin is kind of getting more of those reps, but it was also just because he's going to be using a lot more of those plays as a runner and as a short yardage player to get those yak yardage.
Yeah.
But I think if Brandon Cooks does sit out, then yeah, that would obviously move Jalen Tolbert up because Jalen Tolbert plays that same position that Brandon Cooks does, that Z receiver spot across from Michael Gallup, which would mean you can keep CeeDee Lamb in his natural spot. Dak has shown in camp at least he still has a connection with Jalen Tolbert. Jalen Tolbert's earned that time, and so if Brandon Cooks had to miss time, I would rather have Brandon Cooks be without Brandon Cooks for a game in September if it meant that we had him in February, if that makes sense. Especially if it would give Jalen Tolbert minutes, because I think he's at least earned some more opportunities.
I definitely agree. I wouldn't if he misses this game. That's fine. Like you said, when it comes to Brandon Cooks in the playoffs, that's when he really shows out. We've seen it in years past with the Rams and the Patriots. So, if he misses this game, I'm not gonna cry tears over because we got some depth on his wide receiver.
Yeah.
But when it comes, my bad.
I was gonna ask you actually a question also. Like, so Hendershot and Ferguson, the combination's great, especially from last year. But are the drops something that you think are gonna be a concern? Do you want to see Schoonmaker more? I don't know how you're feeling about the tight end position, because the tight end is actually an area that I think that the Bills could have used more of an advantage against the Jets, but they couldn't do anything with.
Yeah, it almost kind of goes back. Maybe it was due to the weather, but because there were some catches like that was right in their hands. Like when it comes to week 2, you're playing at the Dome. There's not going to be no excuse. Okay, the weather was messing up, and you missed those drops. This is a game for to step it up. But I'm gonna ask Shoemaker there and see how he steps up in the receiving game as well, and kind of sticking to that 12 personnel and getting the tight ends involved, get those quick short yardage, because I know that they're going to be on to the receivers, but they're going to miss one of those tight ends that might be wide open, and they can make a big play.
Do you think that either team, I have a feeling that the Jets, now that Aaron Rodgers won't be there, Zach Wilson's going to be the quarterback. Zach Wilson, I thought, looked serviceable in the second half. Not great, but serviceable.
Yeah.
I really do wonder, especially because Breece Hall looked good, and we know how good Dalvin Cook can be. I wonder if they really do want to use what looks like a pretty formidable 1-2 punch just to take the pressure off of Zach Wilson, like that rookie quarterback mentality. Let the running game take pressure off of him. But I also wonder, if the Cowboys stifle the run like they did against the Giants and they force the Jets to pass, do they trust him to throw the ball? I wonder that.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I think they're going to be their how they're going to set the offense this game is we're going to run the ball and minimize on the passing game because they don't want Zach Wilson to make those turnovers. He's kind of one of those guys who's a risk taker, but hasn't got that confidence and that been in the league long enough to make those passes. But he does got a guy like a Garrett Wilson we got to worry about who can make those, who's excellent when it comes to short area quickness and making those catches in short windows. Mm-hmm. That's one of my biggest concern when it comes to that. But I think when it comes on the other side with Allen Lazard, I think Stephon Gilmore's going to do a great job when it comes to that. I'm trying to think who they have at slot. I know they got Randall Cobb, and I'm trying to think who's the other guys.
So I believe Randall Cobb is their slot. I'm thinking more about along the lines of who matched up with who. If I had to guess, I think Diggs is the guy who would be covering Allen Lazard. I feel like they're going to put Gilmore on Wilson, if I had to guess. But I feel like Diggs has an alpha personality, kind of like a Patrick Surtain or a Sauce Gardner or a Jalen Ramsey. He's going to be the one that says, no, I want the number one receiver. But just scheme-wise, Dan Quinn is more about situational matchups. I don't think he wants to just put one guy on one guy all game.
Oh, it's a good rotation.
And so, and so I think initially Gilmore will be the guy they put on Wilson, but that's definitely a matchup I want to see, just because I think Zach knows this might be his last chance to prove that he can be the franchise quarterback with the Jets. And the best way to do that is to give it to your best receiver. But if you have a guy like Trayvon Diggs who has arguably better hands than half of his receiving core, do you want to test him? Because the Cowboys secondary has guys with hands. These guys are all could play receiver, but they're just so good at corner.
Yeah, there's no butterfingers when it comes to this cornerback room.
No, you saw the way Stephon Gilmore cradled that ball.
Oh yeah, he made his name out there making interceptions and just being overall great corner.
Oh yeah.
But one of my underrated matchups before we get into keys to victory, we kind of went into it already. But I'm looking at Quinn Williams, old big little brother, Quincy Williams plays linebacker, who's that sideline to sideline linebacker that you seen that made that first down stop on James Cook. I know they're gonna have him involved trying to stop Tony Pollard. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
it's not that I'm worried, but I just know that you got to keep an eye on a guy like that. But we got a running back that who has that shifty ability like a Tony Pollard, who could break tackles and make big plays. But we
I
got to.
feel like I'm sorry, you were talking.
Oh no, you're good. What were you about to say?
I was gonna say with Quinn Williams, I feel like they're gonna want to put him in the gap because he primarily plays nose tackle, but he can play three. They're gonna want to put him across from, if not Tyler Smith, then Chuma Edoga, because I feel like the path of least resistance is to go against the not good, but the worst player. And if Quentin Williams goes up against Zach Martin, Zach Martin's gonna hold his own. I feel like they want him to go up against either Tyler Smith or if Tyler can't go, Chuma Edoga, just to get the best out of their best defensive lineman. Because Quentin Williams is one of the best defensive tackles in the game. He is. And with those guys, I feel like they want to put him in the A gap in between left guard and center. I think Biajkin could hold his own, but I think it's more about the matchup against the guard since you brought up him.
Yeah, that's but I was talking about his brother, the linebacker, Quincy
Oh,
Williams.
yeah, Quincy. Okay.
Yeah, he's when I watched him, he was like the side. He's not the biggest guy, but he can get from the next other side to the other side, and that's when
he's very fast. He's very fast.
Yeah, he's got that quickness. But that's one of my main matchups. But getting into the defense, what do you think are some keys to victory when it comes to the defense need to do?
Well, besides cover Garrett Wilson,
Yeah,
I I think I really believe the Jets' offensive line is going to give their pass rush some opportunities. So they need to be able to get to Zach Wilson in a hurry, just because I feel like the Jets know what their offensive line is like and what Zach Wilson's like. They're going to run a lot of under routes, a lot of quick routes. Once they get the receiver open and a quick, these 1-2 yard slants, these 3 yard crossers, they want to run these short routes, especially with heavy blitzes, to where the blitz can't be a factor because the ball is already out of the quarterback's hands. So I think not only do they need to apply pressure, it needs to be in a timely manner, which I think ultimately means the Jets want to get Micah Parsons essentially out of the game with that. So they need to be able to find a way to get to Zach Wilson in a hurry. These sacks need to happen within like 2 to 3 seconds, essentially.
yeah. And one thing I know they're gonna try to do is they're gonna test this defense when it comes to the running game with Brees Hall, who had over 100 yards last game.
Yep.
And you got to contain him as much as possible. And then you got Brandon Cooks as your second one. So they got a nice one.
Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, I said Dalvin Cook. I meant doubt. But yeah, they got a good running game too. So I see them. You got to stop the run game, generate pressure when it comes to the passing game.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the main thing is force Zach Wilson to throw the ball out, or just force a turnover like you did with Daniel Jones. I think that's one of the main things you got to do on defense. But what do you think we need to do on offense?
On offense, I think the Jets know we're going to want to run the ball, especially how well we did last week, and how well Buffalo did. I honestly think that we need to be able to capitalize in the passing game, just because I believe the running game can be effective, but I also believe the Jets are going to want to do everything they can to reinforce the run defense. And so I need to run plays. I need to get my receivers and my tight ends open in areas against a very good secondary, just because I don't want to just rely on my running game when I know the Jets are going to key in on that. They need to be able to move the ball through there as well.
Yeah, you got to get that ball quickly and efficiently. And when it comes to Pollard, you would want to utilize it in the receiving game as well, like attack.
You got to utilize him in general. You got to utilize him in general.
Yeah, you got to run the ball and just see if there's like that quick opening, because he may make that big play. You think Deuce Vaughn gets involved more in this week's game?
I think the way that the Cowboys ran the ball last week was a lot more. Not only do we want to split the carries, because Tony Pollard only had 14 carries, by the way, but they also want to be smart with the way they run the ball. Because if they just run straight up the middle, or they just run straight to the outside, and that's doing nothing. They ran a lot of pulls. They ran a lot of traps. They ran some counter. They ran a couple RPOs with Dak, which was nice because I still think Dak has that in him. I just don't. They don't run a lot of those play designs anymore. I think just the depth of the running back position that they've shown, because even Rico Dowdle averaged 4 yards a carry in reserve, which is fine. I think that is how they're gonna have to set their tone. But ultimately, I'm gonna go back to it. I stand pat that the passing game is ultimately where they're gonna have to like beat the Jets, just because I know running the ball, the Jets are gonna do everything they can to stop it. They know they messed up against Buffalo, then they know they can't allow that against the Cowboys. And the Cowboys, if they can run the ball on them, they'll keep on doing it.
And the best thing about our receivers and our tight ends, they got that yak ability to make those big plays at the catch, even if it's extra 5 to 10 yards. And at the end of the day, it's going to lead you to get into a field goal or a touchdown. Like, and when it comes to, you were saying, the running game, yeah, doing pulls and everything, that stretches out the defense, forces them to try to come to get to you. But we got speed on when it comes to our offensive line and our running game. It's going to be a really good game. I don't really have a score or what the game's going to be, but I think it's going to be more of a closer game than the last.
I still think the Cowboys will win, but that defense does concern me, and I do think the Jets will do everything they can to keep the ball out of Zach Wilson's hands until I think he's comfortable. So I'm not taking him lightly. I never took him lightly regardless, but I still think there's no reason the Cowboys still shouldn't win.
Yeah, and before we end the show, we were talking about it. You know, we got a Thursday night game, Eagles versus Vikings. So, who do you think who's gonna win this game?
I mean, neither team really looked all that good last week, but I don't trust the Vikings defense, and I do trust at least what I saw from the Phillies defense. I thought Phillies defense looked fine, even though Mac Jones looked a lot more like Alabama Mac Jones.
He did.
I still think that the Philly should still win tonight. Last year they actually played in week 2 also. Philly won 24-7. That one was a lot more defensive than people would consider, but it was very much a running game. I still think that Philly should win this game, but I'll probably bring it down to something like a 24-17 type of thing. I don't think either team is going to score a lot of points, but I also don't think either team is really going to like be so dominant offensively that they just run the other team out of the building.
Yeah, I did see a lot of more yardage, and then like it's gonna be like empty calories. You're not gonna see a lot of touchdowns, but you're gonna see Justin Jefferson. He's gonna have some good yardage. Kirk Cousins will have a great game, but overall, when it comes to their defense, it's not any good, to be honest.
They didn't focus on that enough in the offseason.
Yeah, you didn't really see any moves where you could say, okay, the Vikings are serious about this defense. They're like,
the only move they did was they did bring in Brian Flores as DC, which is a good move, but they didn't give him anything to work with.
Yeah, that was like literally their key addition when it comes to the defense. Like, you gotta. That's what we had to do when we got Dan Quinn. You can't just like, oh, okay, here's what we had last year. You had to add what fits their scheme and their defense.
Gotta give them toys.
Yeah, absolutely. But hey, this has been a great show. Can't wait to do this next week. Talk about we play the Cardinals next week.
Cardinals.
Yeah, that's gonna be an interesting one to talk about. See what they're about. But I think we may go 3-0. I may be being a little cocky, but I think it's gonna be a.
Let's get to this week first before we jump into the Cardinals.
I did jump the gun a little bit. I got a little excited from last week, so my bad, y'all. But hey, this has been Tacos and Touchdown Live. Y'all have a good one. Peace.
Peace.